Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today, I actually met at a mastermind event, and I was pretty taken with her really unique look and approach at different ways that you can shift your mental state by the power of your playlist. You'll understand more as we dive in, but I think it's a really interesting topic. She wrote an entire book on this premise of how music can be powerfully and strategically used to shift that state. And of course, with sleep, many times we can find ourselves getting into kind of the spiral of anxiety or stress response, both throughout the day and night. And what if we had on tap a playlist that we could utilize thoughtfully and in a measured and dynamic approach that might adjust over time so that you can actually notice the state and kind of record player that you might be in and kind of repeated dialogue as it relates to sleep, maybe some form of I'm a short sleeper, I'm a bad sleeper, it's, in my genes, maybe sleep is not available to me, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see yourself kind of going into that playlist, if you will. And we can acknowledge that and then choose something new. So we're going to get into the details of all of that today. But first, a little bit of background. Susan Drumm is a CEO advisor, USA Today bestselling author, and leadership coach focused on helping leaders and their teams to develop the capacity and mindsets to lead in today's disruptive environment. She has personally coached billionaire CEOs, high-profile political figures, prominent Fortune 100 executive teams, and incredible entrepreneurs that set out to disrupt the marketplace. Susan draws on many disciplines in her approach. She has graduate degrees from Harvard Law School, Carnegie Mellon University, and the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. Susan attained the highest level of coaching certification as Master Certified Coach through the International Coaching Federation. Susan also holds certification in HeartMath, Integrative Enneagram, EQ Learning in Action, Havening Techniques, the Leadership Circle, and is a Certified Forum Facilitator for YPO Young Presidents Organization. She's a two-time #1 best-selling author of the Leaders Playlist, Unleash the Power of Music and Neuroscience to Transform Your Leadership and Your Life. In the book, Susan unveils a groundbreaking process that outlines how our childhood wounds show up in our ability to lead others and how music can heal those wounds. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. So I get a lot of questions around sleep supplements, and I'm very hesitant to just throw out a whole laundry list of possibilities. One, I don't think it's the most responsible thing to do. I really do believe in testing to see what types of supplements make sense for you. And two, because I really truly believe that most of the things that you can do to improve your sleep are behavioral, psychological, environmental in nature, and often don't cost a dime. However, there is one supplement that I personally take every day and that I do feel quite comfortable with suggesting for most individuals to experiment with because of a couple of reasons. Its high safety profile and high rates of deficiencies in our modern society. Some put the numbers as somewhere around 80% of the population being deficient in this one area, and that is magnesium. So magnesium has been called the calming mineral, and some report that magnesium can increase GABA, which encourages relaxation on a cellular level, which is critical for sleep. Magnesium also plays a key role in regulating our body's stress response system. Those with magnesium deficiency usually have higher anxiety and stress levels, which negatively impact sleep as well. Now, before you go out and buy a magnesium supplement, it's important to understand that most magnesium products out there are either synthetic or they only have 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, when in reality, your body needs all 7 forms of this essential sleep mineral. So that's why I recommend a product from my friends over at BioOptimizers. They have created something called the Magnesium Breakthrough. And taking this magnesium before bed helps you relax and wake up refreshed and energized. And while we don't recommend that you go too nuts on looking at all the sleep stage classifications on all your wearables, I will share anecdotally that many clients have reported improvements in their deep sleep trend numbers. Again, I don't want you going nuts on the sleep stage classification numbers on your wearables, but I do want to let you know about that because I know that many of you do reach out on questions of how to improve your deep sleep. So I also love that BioOptimizers offers free shipping on select orders, and they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee on all their products. Plus, they have a customer satisfaction rating of 99.3%. Very impressive. And you can get 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. Again, this is the same magnesium that I use every single night. And finally, you can get 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. Again, that's the magnesium supplement that I use every single night by going to magbreakthrough.com/sleep is a skill. And be sure to use the code sleep is a skill for 10% off. And welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. Susan Drumm, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today, but just really thank you for making the time.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk with you too. This is great.
Amazing. I was sharing with you before we hit record that truly, out of all the episodes that we've had so far, and of course, it's called the Sleep is a Skill podcast with the intention of helping in many aspects of life to help support people on this journey of improving their skill set, their aptitude for getting great sleep. And you truly will own this topic that we have not had a single person on this podcast that has your area of expertise. I know you have a wide range of expertise, but speaking to your most recent book, this conversation of leveraging music and your playlist, if you will, to support the state that you're in throughout the course of your day and presumably your night, and what we might be able to learn about this and more from you is going to be really, really exciting. So again, this is fantastic. And how did you get to be someone that's written a book on this topic of utilizing your playlist to improve your life? How did this all happen?
Yes. Well, two sides to that. One, I've been doing leadership development work and CEO coaching for over 20 years now. And in the work and working with teams as well. And in the work, I noticed patterns of leaders that kept them from being the best leader they could be. It essentially put a ceiling on their leadership effectiveness. And I think we all have superpowers, and I believe we also have liabilities, which I'm going to talk about. Yeah. But my superpower is pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. It's really what got me into law school. I went to Harvard Law, and the way I got in, I took several LSATs. I could see the patterning, and I knew how to ace that test, right?
Yes.
And so it's really this gift of pattern recognition, and a lot of what my book is about is noticing the deep-seated patterns in your life that hold you back. And so what I like to say in this is that our childhood wounds show up in our leadership today. The book is The Leader's Playlist, How to Unleash the Power of Music and Neuroscience to Transform Your Leadership in Your Life. Mm. So there's sort of two components to it. First is noticing that we have these patterns and that the patterns got formed in childhood and they show up and they effectively put that ceiling in your leadership. Now, we all have experienced some type of childhood wound, and some are actually childhood trauma. Some are far worse than others, but there's always been some wounded patterning. And that can get in the way. It can also get in the way of sleep, which we'll be talking about, from really being the effective leader you want to be. And there was this other component to it, which is how music can actually interrupt that pattern and help you build a new pattern or a new neural pathway. Because what we're really talking about is neural pathways. You've grooved in a neural pathway, and music is actually incredibly effective at interrupting the pathway and almost being a fertilizer to create a new pathway.
Yes, so well said. And it's so interesting that you spoke to this pattern recognition piece, because that's one of the things that we find for people in their journey of improving their sleep. And especially in our modern day, when they can use different wearables, or even if they're the lowest tech version doing a sleep diary and just kind of logging their results, you can start to pretty quickly spot some patterns that are either serving you or not serving you as it relates to your sleep. So someone like you with this aptitude is really an important asset. And I'm really excited to talk about this piece on sound. And how did you identify for yourself that this was an area that you really wanted to create this book around and help people make a difference in their lives, and how empowered, relaxed, at ease, et cetera, any state that they want to be in that they can kind of have available to them? How did this come to be?
Yes. Well, from my own experience, starting there, I had the end of a significant relationship of 5 years, and it was quite devastating to me.
Yes.
In terms of, there was some betrayal, there were some revelations that were like, whoa,
sure. A lot.
And I got stuck in this loop of resentment and frustration that I knew as a coach wasn't serving me.
Sure.
But anytime my mind would kind of go back to that, I would be, back in this loop of resentment. And I tried all different modalities and I couldn't seem to break it.
Yeah.
And what I learned after writing about my life and looking at these patterns is it was part of a deeper playlist called I Am Treated Unfairly. Now, if anybody would have looked at what happened, they would have said, yes, you were treated unfairly, right? So objectively, you could say that, although there's perspectives on, there's other perspectives. Sure, he has a perspective, right?
Yeah, sure.
But it was this pattern that I knew I needed to break. I didn't know how far down the rabbit hole that pattern went. Let's just say I was dealing with, as we normally do as humans, the current circumstance. And I'm like, I have got to get myself out of this loop of resentment. So what I found was that music was the only thing that kind of soothed me, but it did more than soothe me. It actually healed me. And how it did that was I created this playlist called I Am Empowered. And it was songs that were all music that would have me get into the energetic state, the vibration of empowerment. Like I am a badass woman, right?
Yes.
And I would play this anytime I felt myself kind of starting down something would trigger and I would have a memory. Nope, not doing that. I'm going and put the music on. And it was the quickest way I could shift state. And I would play it hiking. And the more I did it, the more I found I could let that go, that I actually knew what to do when the trigger would happen, how to use music to shift it. And I started saying, gosh, there's something to this. Like, what is it with music?
Yeah.
And so I started researching how music impacts the brain, why it works, and started using it with my clients on their deepest seated patterns and helping them create a new playlist. And that's really how the origin of it all began, through myself.
I love that. I actually was mentioning you at a conference that I was just at recently, because this woman was sharing that she'd had a breakthrough with her daughter, her teenage daughter, she was, dealing with a lot of anxiety and stress and sleep disruptions. Of course, we're beginning there, but the mother had discovered that part of the things that the daughter would listen to in leading up to sleep were all these very, very sad songs that just, spoke to kind of how she was feeling. So it kind of felt like in alignment with her state, and yet seemed to be kind of perpetuating this state that she was in. And then they interrupted the types of music. Now, I certainly, of course, referred and referenced your book to go in deeper and, maybe have some more evidence and science behind the why and more strategy. But on that soft kind of the conversation, totally shifted their results as she started to, one, just kind of abstain from those types of songs. And then secondly, beginning to bring in different types of music. I mean, it sounds like, oh, well, of course, but when you're in it, you don't necessarily get this. And so I'm curious if for the listener, if they're listening, and presumably most people that are listening to this podcast are either struggling with their sleep or they're sleeping okay, but they want to improve it. Something often with their nervous system management is just off, or there's an opportunity to kind of reframe how they're relating to their sleep and, not being at the effect of it, or the kind of sometimes like a victimhood state that we can get in. Unfortunately, why can't this sleep work for us? So what would you say to someone like that is looking to improve their sleep and just kind of struggling with that sense of ease or peace of mind?
Yes. Well, we know music has the ability to shift state because that's why we use it to work out, right? We know it gets us pumped up. And what I'm suggesting in the book is that we can use it even more powerfully to break old patterns and create new patterns that we're just scratching the surface using it to work out.
Totally.
So I would say a surface level use would be start to listen before going to bed to music that puts you in the sort of emotional state you most want to be in. So if it's like for one of my clients, it was peace and appreciation. What music actually has you feel that? What songs will bring that on? And create a little playlist for yourself. And you do have to update it from time to time because I believe the brain likes variety. So it may work for you initially and then it wears off because the brain got used to it and you've got to layer in new music to do that. But I would say, get really intentional about what is the state that you want to be in and what music has you be in that state as sort of, let's say, level one. And then level two is to really do some of the work that I suggest in the book to look at the deeper patterns in your life, to look at where does it feel like Groundhog Day? Where does it feel like you're stuck in a rut? Because a rut is just an interesting metaphor. It's really what it's a pathway that deer go back and forth.
Sure.
And it's like it's just road. And if you're a hunter, that's where the deer are very vulnerable. In fact, you got to look for good ruts. And I think the same way we get stuck in ruts and it makes us vulnerable, particularly to the level of change and just escalating pace of complexity that's occurring now. We're vulnerable because we're stuck in these ruts. And so what I would encourage is to kind of look at and look at what are some of these deeper seated patterns. And as we talk about in the book, what's the old playlist for you? Mine was I'm treated unfairly. Other leaders I've worked with, it's, I'm not good enough, or I have to be perfect, or they're usually I am statements, but they're really deep seated patterns that you may not be able to see right like initially, but if you go through some of the steps, you'll start to see, there is sort of this theme. And in fact, I can trace it back to childhood.
So interesting. What did you find in your research from a neuroscience perspective that we can bear in mind too? So as we're starting to create these playlists, practice this, go through some of the exercises in the book to kind of get up under what that existing kind of playlist has been. And it sounds like it's not like you're making that wrong. It's just kind of like how that's been for us and just something to notice, like a pattern is there. And then we can kind of get out of that rut or kind of create a new record player, if you will, of maybe more of our own design. Yeah. So with that, is that something where you would suggest people stand in particular sets of or awareness on this neuroscience piece? What are some of the ways that we can think about this from a scientific perspective?
Yeah, well, music lights up all regions of the brain. So on an MRI. And in fact, if you look at music therapy that they use with Alzheimer's patients who are unresponsive, you play their favorite music and it's as if they come alive.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a measurable increase in happiness, in eye contact, in ability to speak, and a decrease in fatigue and depression. And they're monitoring them all for these symptoms. And this can be seen on an MRI where all parts of the brain are lighting up when this happens. So I think that's just such a strong, powerful tool that, you think back to music can put us in a time and place like this. Think back to, you hear a song that you remember from your senior high school prom or something.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God. And the memory comes right back, right? How is that possible? And I think it's important to know that music is highly influential. So one of the books that I cite in there is this great book called Sonic Boom: How Music Influences the Way We Think, Feel, and Buy. So advertisers know this. They are using certain music, using certain jingles, things like that, to build in that neural pathway related to their product. And the thing is, we need to be a little bit more intentional about what we're listening to. And I want to go back to the story that you told about the woman who was like, that's the emotional resonance she was in. So that's what she wanted to hear, which makes total sense, right? When you're in a breakup, you want to hear the breakup songs, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Which is not in itself a bad thing at all, because we do need to process those emotions.
Sure.
And it can be, music can be really helpful with that. My point is, when you get stuck in it, like I was, like, okay, like, at some point, move on.
Yeah. Right.
And yes, I need to do all the work to process it and feel it, but it's in a way I'm actually not, I'm reinforcing it now. As opposed to processing, I'm reinforcing. And that's what music can do. It can reinforce it. And so I think with your, the example that you gave, she was reinforcing this state. And that's why I also talk about in the book an interrupter song, which is your anchor song in your old playlist. So we get really clear what the old playlist is, but what's your anchor song in that? And for example, for me, it was my anchor song was Jar of Hearts by Christina Perri. And so when I found myself going down, I'm like, oh, there's Christina Perri. Yep, I know that song. We're going to change the channel now.
So good.
There was just like this
great
way to interrupt that pattern using it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I feel like that can be really, really helpful for people struggling with their sleep. There can be sort of this old narrative of, it's me, I'm broken, I'm never going to sleep again. Like, this is kind of just how it is, or, I'm this way, a lot of fixed states. And to almost be able to diffuse the weight that comes with those things and those narratives, I think can just be really, really powerful to, that's just a song I'm singing or what have you. And I can actually shift that and change the channel. That's fantastic. So with your clients, you have them really just go to work on investigating, experiencing new types of music, or just kind of sitting with themselves with noticing the impact that this has, and then creating that new playlist, but dynamically and shifting that up and changing that up?
Yeah. So first we get clear on what is their current playlist, or I like to call old playlist, because it's soon to be old.
Yeah.
And that has to do with, first we look at what's going on today, that where are you getting triggered? Where does it feel like you're bumping your head against the ceiling? And then we kind of go back a little bit and say, where else is that showing up in your life, or has it shown up in your life? And what are you saying to yourself about this issue? And out of that work, you're starting to claim, like, I'm listening for what's the underlying old playlist title. And then once we have it, like, does that feel resonant? Like, for me, I'm treated unfairly. Like, oh yeah, I can see that I have felt that. Anytime things would go wrong, it's the place I would go. I'm treated unfairly.
Yeah.
And so in that, okay, what's the anchor song that will best support you to interrupt that pattern? And then we go to say, and what do we want to switch it to, right? What do you want to be in? And mine, again, was I am empowered. So what now we need to experiment with, what's the music that has you actually have that frequency, that vibration of feeling empowered? Because that's what music is. It's vibration and frequency. And we are all vibrational beings. Everything vibrates, including the earth. So you have an option to change the frequency of which you're emanating into the world, and what will come back to you, it will respond to that. which is why I say, if I have this belief, I'm treated unfairly, which I didn't go around going, I didn't think I had that belief. Do you know what I mean? Like I people that know me, I'm very optimistic. I'm a happy person. Like it would have never occurred to me that I had this going on. And yet it was only through writing about my life and looking at the low points that I realized I actually do.
Sure.
You know? Yeah. And it took me doing that as a coach who does plenty of self-introspection.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I've got to deliver something to others so that they can catch themselves the way I needed to.
So important. And I think even in the process of that, because I liked how you pointed to, it's not like we're just being avoidant of these states. We're noticing, appreciating, and actually calling attention to that this has been a way of being for us. And then also distinguishing that we can choose something new in the face of that while getting complete with whatever's there. So it's kind of this duality. But I also appreciated, so we met through this other group that looks at, up-leveling life and what have you, right? And so one of these other mastermind groups, and I remember in your talk there, you had shared how this could relate to certain pieces of performance. So many people have performance anxiety, which really can lend itself to an analogy with sleep, because we see for people that night after night, it can almost go in the domain of a performance and that they keep failing at every single night, and then it can start to be like, oh, I've got this horrible record and track record around my sleep. And then we start to really believe that we're just poor performers in that area. Now, you mentioned as it relates to the example of giving a talk, right? And so in prep for that from a state of performance that we could actually prime ourselves to the state that we want to be in, which I feel like one, for a lot of people we work with, they're struggling in some way, shape, or form throughout the course of their day, whether it's feeling unfulfilled or just not showing up in the way that they would like, or some sort of way that's disrupting their nervous system. And so one, having this ability for something like that, and then also for sleep, another type of performance. But I'm curious if on the speech analogy, if you can speak to some of that, how that can be useful in times that people might, because we see that a ton, anticipatory anxiety for people. If they know they have a big talk or something scary or a big meeting with a boss or whatever, that this could be kind of a secret weapon for them.
Yes, it's really when we're at the highest level of stress that sometimes these old playlists come out. So what I like to explore, like, what is it that I am stressed about? What's the real fear? So what's the fear underneath it? And what am I making this mean, again, about me? Right.
Yes.
So what's the fear? I'm going to forget my lines up there. And what happens if that happens? I'm going to look stupid. Yeah. So what's the underlying fear? I fear that I look stupid, right? Or I fear. And so underneath it is, then if you fear that, there must be some belief at its core that I am stupid. Yeah. Like that it could show up, right? Or whatever the language is, because you wouldn't have that fear if you didn't actually hold, even subconsciously, that belief.
Yes. So wise.
Good. So that's where music can be like, okay, what do I want? Who do I want to be? Oh my God, I want to show up just, being this wise woman. Great. What music just represents that to you? Embody that, feel that, and then walk on stage. Oh my God, you're going to be a different person.
Ah, love that. Amazing. Just such a simple and yet profoundly impactful practice, and something that's so accessible to anyone. Anyone can put this together. There's not a financial cost, a hindrance in this conversation. We can all access this. So really, really, really powerful. And one of the things that we see on this podcast is that every person that we bring on, people want to know, all right, well, we've been talking about all these things in relation to sleep. How is this person managing their sleep? So I know people are going to want to know, and maybe what playlists you got going on or what have you as it relates to your sleep. So our first question is, what does your nightly sleep routine look like right now?
I have a set routine for getting ready for bed. Yeah. And I usually, once I get into bed, I start breathing very deeply through my belly. So I start taking 5 breaths through my belly. And usually my thing is I fell asleep pretty easily. Like I can fall asleep in like 1 minute. Where I have struggled in the past is the 2:30 wake up call.
Yeah.
and brain is going and the blah, blah, right?
Yeah.
And so what I've had to do is manage through that piece. Like, what is that? Now, do I want to go listen to some music right then? Sometimes not really. But I've got to look at what did I do during the day to amp myself up and not actually give myself a little bit more downtime. And I think that's my own journey is like, I go.
Sure.
Right. And so my nervous system, I think, has trouble shutting down.
Yeah.
So I've got to find ways to like really chill, but particularly the last half hour. I try to stay off electronics for sure. Like, what can I read? And noticing the inputs that are, what am I reading? Like, I don't want to read the news. I don't want to read anything that's like, it's got to be very sort of neutral or calming.
Love that. And then what might we see in your morning routine with the thinking that how we start our day and manage our day can impact our nights, which I love that you pointed to. And certainly that pattern recognition ability, sure you can kind of identify certain things that both work and maybe don't work as well. So anything in your morning that sets you up powerfully?
So what works is going right to the chair and meditate like immediately. And I do that every day. Some are better meditations than others.
Totally.
Right? And what impacts that is my dopamine hit of looking at the phone. Like I should just not look at that freaking phone until I am done with my meditation. And sometimes though, I'm excited. Like I generally have an excited personality.
Yeah. Right.
So I'm excited to see like, oh, what is it? And it's literally like, there's a piece of chocolate right there. And so one of the things actually I'm going to start experimenting with is taking the phone out of the room. It's not even a temptation. It's going to be plugged in the kitchen. And when I get up, I go to the chair to meditate.
Right, so, right. Do not pass the phone. Do not. Yep, totally. I love that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And then what might we see on your nightstand? And if you're traveling, proverbial nightstand, to the ambiance apps, gadgets, and it sounds like maybe very soon coming to a bedroom near you, no phone, possibly, but what else might we see?
So I guess I use two things, and one is sort of a shout out to my friend. There's these things called touch points that if I wake up in the middle of the night with some like anxiety feelings, you use these, they hold them in each hand and they vibrate back and forth. And the studies show that it reduces stress within 30 seconds. Like 70% of stress is reduced in 30 seconds. So her name is Dr. Amy Sarin, and she invented these, and they're called touch points. They're great for that. You could go to her website to get them, but I found it really helpful because they do reduce the stress in the middle of the night. So these are on my nightstand. And the other thing on my nightstand is a melatonin spray that I just spray in the back because it'll get into my blood versus taking something that has to go through the digestion. I just do like a spray or two to help me if I know I have, let's say the wake up is like 1:30 and I know I have enough time. If it's like 4:00, I'm not going to use that stuff. So
yes, the strategy piece. No, I think that's really, really great that you have kind of a set of things that you go to and feel like you're set up powerfully. Do you travel with the touch points too? Or you do? Okay, really cool. I'll have to look into those. And then the last question would be, what would you say has made the biggest change to your sleep game, or said another way, biggest aha moment in managing your sleep?
Yeah, also looking at patterns and childhood wounds in particular, I went back and learned that it's kind of a little embarrassing to talk about, but at 5 years old, I used to wet my pants a lot. And the reason at
relatable.
School, because I didn't want to stop to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And because I was having so much fun. And this is sort of I have this exuberance, right? I don't want to, and so I had to go back and kind of heal a little bit of that, because then it created embarrassment and a bunch of things out of that. Because if you fast forward the analogy, I wasn't allowing myself taking care of my body. My mind wants to go do something else, but my body needs something. And now as an adult, my body needs sleep. but my mind wants to go and like, let's check the phone and, oh my God, we get these emails and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like, no, I didn't honor my body the way I needed to then, but I'm going to do so now. So I think it was, and I did some of that through hypnosis as well as to learn and sort of see those linkages, but also again, journaling and doing some of the work that I talk about in the book.
So great and so relatable. I mean, I don't know who listening couldn't relate to this conversation of our mind wanting certain things and the body needing something else entirely, and having to identify that and be responsible for all of that and manage that. So really, really great stuff. And I appreciate you mentioning the hypnosis piece. Yeah, we've had one hypnotist on the podcast. We have another one coming up soon, but just a really great modality that has a lot of science behind it to also be an avenue for people to work through some of these things. So really great call out there. Now, people listening definitely are going to want to know, how can they learn more about you, get the book? What are the things coming, the exciting things? Tell us everything. The exuberance, share the exuberance.
Well, I would invite people to go to my website and take a free quiz that I have there called the Enlightened Leader Quiz. And in that, it's a simple 7-question quiz, but it'll help point you in the direction of what could be the old playlist and what your superpower and liability is as a result of that. So it's at susandrumm.com, SUSANDRUMM. And interesting, I have an instrument in my name.
Yeah, right.
Only with 2 M's.
We should have led with that. Yeah,
I know. Yeah. But if you take the quiz, what you'll also do is you'll get follow-up material that will point you to like which chapters in the book might be particularly helpful. Because in the book, I go through the 9 most common old playlists that I've seen. And so they're not all of them, but it might help you in determining your own. So just really encourage people to go there. And obviously the book is on Amazon. It's also on Audible. And it's called The Leader's Playlist.
Fantastic. Yes, definitely get this book. And I really, really love this. After speaking with you, I had cleaned up one of my playlists that I do before talks. And I just shared with you that I just gave a larger talk just recently. And it was so helpful to have this playlist just, kind of freshened up and with the things that just get you jazzed up. So that was really, really impactful. And now even out of this conversation, I want to take more time to really create some other playlists, because you had me thinking as you were speaking of some of the things Blake, you met Blake, my husband, and we had lived in Southeast Asia for a period of time when we were digital nomads. And in Southeast Asia, we would be going to, they would have Thai massages and what have you. And so you would go in and just the music would be set to relaxation. And it's just crazy the difference that would just automatically make. And why I'm not leveraging that more routinely is beyond me. So I'm going to take your advice and make that happen and just have all the spectrums of those different types of emotional states that you might want to have. The highs, the relaxation, being able to access those is really, really incredible. Yes. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. I can't wait to see what you discover after using it.
Oh, well, thank you, Susan. Appreciate you taking the time. And definitely everyone listening, check out her work. Take that quiz that's available and get some of that information right away so that you can make this really actionable for yourself. You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.